All right. So, routers. Not the ones in your workshop that you might be cutting wood with or doing your next project with, but actually network routers that move move computer data across the network and give us internet, Wi-Fi, Netflix, video games, you name it. Today I'm going to explain to you what a router is, how it works, and maybe the pros and cons or advantages and disadvantages of why you'd want a router, or actually you'd always want a router, but why advantages and disadvantages of the router in your network. So to get right into it, what a router is, Cisco says that a router is basically a small computer specialized for moving data across a network. Now it does this through IP addresses and a routing table. Now IP address is a number. It's 256 bits and it can be 4 numbers of the 256. That's IPv4. And basically that is like an address to a destination on a network, like a computer, smart TV, smartphone, another network device. It could be another router, honestly. It can be anything. And so it's like an address, like a mailing address. And imagine that your router is, imagine the whole country is the internet, the post office would be a network. And at the top of the network would be a router. Because a router is sitting at the top of the network stack always. And every device will go through it, every device will be eventually served by it. And a router will move the mail, going back to my post office analogy, from one post office to another post office, but it typically won't put the data or the mail into the computer or the PO box. It just moves it across networks. That's what a router's main job is, and it uses IP addresses to do that. So how a router moves the data and how it knows where to move it? Well, routers use administrative distance and IP addressing like we talked about. Cisco on their website says that administrative distance is a metric by which routers use to determine trustworthiness of a routing or a route that a router will take for packets. So basically, like there's a bunch of roads to a different post office or a different router, and one of them might be bumpy and one of them might be a nice highway. The router will determine which one is the best one, and it will choose that one to send all the data across the network to. And it might keep the dirt road as like kind of a backup, and it'll store both of those in what is known as a routing table that it can refer to every time it encounters an IP address on a piece of data that it's sent called a packet. So the advantages and disadvantages of a router. The main advantage is the security. You isolate yourself from a network, especially because some routers, like routers that you might be used to, like a small office, home office router, usually has a firewall built into it, and that isolates your network from the internet. So if you have like a computer that has a bunch of pictures on it and it's not set up properly, if you didn't have that firewall that's included in the router, then they would see your pictures. It's a big plus for security, and also helps speed things up a lot. And honestly, without a router, you couldn't really connect to the internet anyway. So that's a main plus with the router there. But it does come, and another advantage is a broadcast domain. The author of the book, Computer Networks, Mr. Tannenbaum, says that a broadcast is when a computer sends one piece of data to every other computer in that network. And this is typically good for computers that find their way around the network, like maybe it's a new computer that just connected and it can't find the way to the router, or use a broadcast to find the router, which is good. But if you have a lot of that, it can slow the network down because every computer is sending everybody else data and everybody's having to read that data. It can slow everybody down. A router will actually shut down a broadcast. If it gets broadcast, it won't forward them out, it won't send them anymore, it'll just throw them away. And that helps eliminate or cut down on how big a broadcast can spread to across the network, and keeps the congestion low, which actually leads into my disadvantage of a router, is that it can be affected by congestion. Occasionally a router will actually get congested with network data, and usually they can keep up, but if it's a lot of data it's moving, it can slow way down. And usually this is caused by store and forward routing, which is basically where a router has to take your data and then proofread it before it can send it out. It's basically checking for errors or corrupting data, or maybe it's not supposed to be sent this way or something like that. And to go back to our post office analogy, it's like if the post office had to read all of your mail to make sure there was no spelling mistakes, and if there was spelling mistakes, they would just throw your mail away. That would be terrible. That would slow everybody down. Some mail might not ever even get delivered. So that's what routers do with packets, and that slows us way down. Even those few milliseconds of it reading and then sending it can slow things down. It can create lag, can create buffering. That can be a big problem. So today I've told you all about routers, what they are, what they do, and how they do it, and then also gave you some advantages and disadvantages of routers. And so maybe you can use this information next time you're talking to someone about routers for some reason, or you're talking to your internet service provider about problems that you're having at your house, or maybe you are actually interested in buying one yourself, or just curious about how your network works at home. So thank you.